Hey wild ones, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're not just telling a story. We're stepping into a blizzard, into the roar of a prehistoric beast, and into the very essence of what it meant to be truly impossibly tough. Forget everything you thought you knew about cavemen. Erase the image of the stooped, grunting brute, because for 400,000 years, a different kind of human, a human built like a mountain range, dominated the most brutal landscape this planet has ever known. They were the Neanderthals. Imagine this. The air is ice, so cold it burns your lungs with every breath. You're deep in the primeval forest, a shadow among the ancient pines, when suddenly the ground trembles. Not an earthquake, but something far more terrifying. A cave bear, 12 feet of muscle, fury, and teeth like curved daggers, erupting from the darkness, eyes glinting with a demonic rage reflected in the sputtering light of your torch. And behind you, the one person you would die for, your daughter. A paw the size of a dinner plate catches you across the chest. The world explodes in pain, sending you flying into the unyielding rock of the cave wall. Ribs shatter, a sickening crunch, and blood fills your mouth. Any modern human would be dead or wishing they were. But you're Gorak. You are Neanderthal. Your body, a fortress of bone and sinew, screams in protest, yet your mind is singular. Survive. Your daughter. You grip the spear, thick as your forearm, a flint blade honed to a razor's edge. The bear charges again, a monstrous avalanche of prehistoric rage. This isn't a story of desperate, scrambling survival. This is the story of an impossible defiance, of planting your feet, angling that spear, and meeting death head-on. 400 pounds of raw power impaling itself on pure Neanderthal engineering. The spear bends, holds, then snaps, but not before finding its mark, the bear's heart. You stand broken, lungs punctured with a dozen cracked bones. Injuries that would kill us in hours, but you live another 30 years. Think about that for a second. 30 years. How did these people, with nothing but stone tools and an indomitable will, take down woolly mammoths, giants of the Ice Age? How did they fend off 7-foot hyenas that stalked their children, or survive volcanic winters that plunged temperatures to 60 below zero? How did they face down saber-toothed cats, monstrous bears, and ravenous wolf packs with sheer muscle, courage, and weapons they carved from the very stone around them? These weren't just survivors. They were the ultimate apex predators. They brought down giants. They endured the unendurable. They were so tough that broken bones were mere inconveniences, and modern Olympic athletes would look like children beside them. They mastered fire when Europe was a frozen wasteland, crafted weapons capable of felling a mammoth, performed intricate surgery with stone knives, and built colossal shelters from the bones of their prey. This isn't a story of primitive cavemen grunting their way through existence. This is a saga of superhumans. Every hunt was a boss fight, every winter an apocalypse, every single day a battle that would shatter us. But not them, never them, until one day they were gone. Just gone. What the hell happened? Was it the ultimate prehistoric showdown when Homo sapiens invaded their territory? Did we defeat them in brutal combat, outsmart them or outbreed them? Or did these warriors, who feared nothing that walked the earth, meet an enemy even they couldn't defeat? This is their story, not of primitive creatures struggling to survive, but of the most successful predators our planet has ever produced. Hunters who killed giants with pointed sticks, warriors who laughed at wounds that would break us, survivors who conquered a frozen world with nothing but strength, raw intelligence, and absolutely zero quit. And tonight, we're uncovering the shocking truth about what really killed the unkillable. Welcome, wild ones, to the most violent, brutal, and utterly incredible survival story ever told. The real Game of Thrones had tusks. The flickering torchlight casts long, dancing shadows across the cave wall, illuminating ancient carvings, a red deer, symbols marking the passage of seasons. But tonight, there's no warmth in the flame, no comfort in the familiar, just the slow, ragged breath of a woman who knows she is dying. Not from the fever that has burned through her body for days. Not from the cough that brings blood to her lips. She is dying because she is the last of her kind in this cave, this sanctuary that has sheltered her people for 1,000 generations. Outside, the snow falls softly on the Gibraltar cliffs, a familiar blanket every winter of her 42 years. But this winter is different. The others are gone. Her daughters, taken by the same relentless fever. Her sisters, swallowed by the storm, vanished into the frozen wilderness, searching for food that no longer came. The great herds, the very lifeblood of her people, had fled south. The berries, once plentiful, failed to grow. Even the sea, always generous with its shellfish and seals, had turned cold, barren, unforgiving. She presses her hand against the cave wall, feeling the grooves worn smooth by countless hands before hers. Here, her grandmother had painted the red deer, bringing their spirit to life on the stone. There, her mother had carved the symbols that tracked the sun's journey, marking the sacred rhythm of their world. All of them gone now, their voices silenced, their stories, their entire world, ending with her rattling breath. But here's where the story takes a turn, a twist that science, not myth, has revealed. Her story didn't truly end in that Gibraltar cave 28,000 years ago, because just 3 weeks before her last breath, a group of tall, slim strangers had passed through the valley below. They were different, these newcomers, with a lighter build, a different gait. And among them walked a young woman, someone whose own grandmother had been different, stockier, stronger, with eyes that held a different kind of knowing, a different ancient wisdom. That young woman carried something precious in her blood, something that would travel across continents and through millennia, genes that would help her descendants survive new plagues, adapt to strange climates, and build civilizations in places the last Neanderthal could never have imagined. This is the incredible secret that the Earth has held for tens of thousands of years. Today, if you carry European, Asian, or Native American ancestry, you are carrying between 1% and 4% of that dying woman's legacy in every single cell of your body. Her people's genes aren't just ancient relics. They actively influence how you respond to viruses, how your skin reacts to sunlight, even how your brain processes pain. The last Neanderthal may have died alone, a silent goodbye in a cold cave, but she didn't disappear. None of them did. They became us. This is the story of how that happened. How a species that survived 400,000 years of ice ages, volcanic winters, and predators that would terrify us today finally met the one challenge they couldn't overcome: us. But it's also the story of how, in losing to us, they won a different kind of immortality. Because every time you fight off a cold, every time your body efficiently processes fat in winter, every time you feel that deep, inexplicable connection to a cave painting or a perfectly crafted stone tool, you are experiencing the profound gift the Neanderthals left behind. They were our competitors. They were our lovers. They were our teachers. And in ways science is only just beginning to understand, they are, quite literally, our ancestors. All right, wild ones, let's go back even further now. Imagine a journey 100,000 years into the past, to a world choked by glaciers and ruled by frost. You stand face to face with a Neanderthal. What's your first thought? It wouldn't be about how different they looked, not initially. Your breath would catch, your mind would reel, at one undeniable, jaw-dropping truth: how impossibly strong they were. The man standing before you would be shorter than average by today's standards, maybe 5 feet 5 inches, but built like a professional wrestler who'd spent a lifetime training in a walk-in freezer. His chest would be massive, truly barrel-shaped, with ribs flaring out to accommodate lungs that were a staggering 20% larger than yours. His arms, thick as tree trunks, would showcase muscle attachments that modern bodybuilders could only dream of achieving. This wasn't just raw power. This was evolutionary engineering on a grand scale. But it was the subtle differences, the almost imperceptible refinements, that truly mattered. Those wide, prominent nostrils weren't just for show. They were sophisticated heating systems, warming the biting Arctic air before it could damage delicate lung tissue. That projecting face acted like a car's radiator in reverse, filled with intricate sinuses that trapped and warmed each precious breath, ensuring their core temperature remained stable in a world that would freeze us solid. Even their seemingly shorter limbs served a purpose. Less surface area meant less heat loss, the same principle that keeps a coffee mug warmer than a dinner plate. As paleoanthropologist John Hawkes perfectly puts it, they were the Ferraris of the Ice Age. Every single adaptation was precision-engineered for their environment. And the numbers, wild ones, they tell an extraordinary story of what these beings truly were. A typical Neanderthal male weighed around 185 pounds, but that weight was distributed completely differently than ours. Where modern humans average about 29% muscle mass, Neanderthals pushed a mind-blowing 40 to 45%. Their bones? 40% thicker than ours, with walls so dense, so incredibly compact, they could snap a modern surgical saw. This was a body designed not just for survival, but for dominance in the harshest conditions imaginable. Yet, perhaps most remarkably, their hands tell us they were far from the clumsy brutes of popular imagination. Those powerful fingers, with thumbs longer and stronger than ours, could exert crushing force when needed. Imagine grabbing hold of a struggling mammoth calf. Yet, these very same hands created delicate jewelry from eagle talons, painted intricate symbols on cave walls, and played what might have been humanity's very first flutes. The brute strength was undeniable, yes, but it was coupled with a surprising, profound dexterity and an aesthetic sense. And the women? Oh, they were built just as powerfully as the men, though perhaps slightly smaller in stature. A Neanderthal woman would have made today's Olympic athletes look fragile. Chemical analysis of their bones shows they were every bit as active as the males, hunting the same dangerous prey, traveling the same brutal distances, surviving the same impossible odds. Their childhoods were also different. They grew up faster than ours, reaching full adult brain size by age 5, instead of our leisurely teenage development. By the age of 8, a Neanderthal child would already be learning the ropes of mammoth hunting. By 12, they were full, contributing members of the hunting party. It was a childhood compressed by necessity, but not without play. We found toy spears and what might be dolls in their sights. This accelerated development, however, came with a cost. Neanderthal mothers needed a staggering 5,000 calories a day while nursing, nearly double what modern mothers require. In a world where every single calorie had to be hunted, gathered, or scavenged, this massive energy requirement shaped everything about their society. Yet, for 400,000 years, these adaptations worked perfectly. The Neanderthals weren't just surviving in Ice Age Europe. They were thriving. Their bodies were masterpieces of evolution, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of natural selection into perfect cold-weather survival machines. But perfection for one environment can quickly become a prison when that environment changes. And change, wild ones, was coming, carried in the slender bodies of a very different kind of human, walking north from Africa. The attack came at dawn, when the mist still clung to the valley floor, a ghostly shroud over a world about to change forever. 13 members of the clan were in the cave, 3 adult men. For women, 3 teenagers, 2 children, and baby Peeler, barely old enough to crawl. They never had a chance. Strangers, swift and brutal, fell upon them with a fury born of desperation. Stone axes rose and fell again and again, until the screaming stopped. Now, this isn't just another grim tale of prehistoric violence. This is the story of the El Sidron family, and what their bones, preserved for tens of millennia in a Spanish cave, would reveal would revolutionize our understanding of Neanderthal society. Found in 1994, these 13 individuals died together around 49,000 years ago. But it was what geneticist Carl Laloisifox discovered in 2010 that made them truly famous. Through painstaking DNA analysis, he uncovered something utterly remarkable. These weren't just random individuals who happened to share a cave. They were a family. All 7 males, from the adult men down to the children, shared identical mitochondrial DNA, inherited from their mothers. They were brothers, cousins, uncles, and nephews. But the adult women each carried different mitochondrial signatures. They had come from other clans. It was like looking at a family photo album, written in the very code of life in DNA. As Lalloisa Fox explains, the men stayed where they were born. The women came from outside to join them. This pattern, called patrilocality, revealed a sophisticated social structure. Neanderthal women, likely in their teens, would leave their birth families to join their mates' clans. It was a system that beautifully prevented inbreeding while maintaining territorial stability. The men knew every rock, every hunting ground, every seasonal change in their homeland, because their fathers and grandfathers had taught them. The women brought new genes, new knowledge, perhaps even new technologies from their birth clans, enriching the collective wisdom. But the L. Sidron family showed us something even more profound. Analysis of their bones revealed chronic malnutrition. Their teeth showed distinct growth interruptions from repeated periods of starvation. Yet, they had survived these hardships together for years. When food was scarce, they shared what little they had. When children went hungry, the adults went hungrier. When the baby cried, someone always had enough energy, enough compassion, to comfort her. They were barely surviving, yes, but they were surviving together. The bonds were undeniable, woven into their very bones. The bones tell other stories, too. One teenager had a painful tooth abscess that would have made eating agony. Yet, he was well-nourished, meaning someone, probably his mother, had been mashing his food for him, ensuring he ate despite the pain. An adult male had an injured shoulder that never properly healed. He couldn't have thrown a spear or carried heavy loads, but he was just as well-fed as the others. In their final moments, the family was together. The children's bones were found near the women's, as if they'd tried to shield the young with their bodies. The men were scattered near the cave entrance. They tried to fight. The attackers, perhaps driven to the ultimate taboo by their own desperation, butchered them with the same stone tools they would have used on reindeer or horses. Cut marks on the bones, cracked open for marrow, tell us this was cannibalism, a grim testament to the utter desperation of that time. But even in death, the L. Sidron family couldn't be separated. Their bones remained tangled together, a testament to bonds that transcended death. 13 individuals who lived, loved, struggled, and died as one. They show us that Neanderthals weren't so different from us, says archaeologist Antonio Rosas. They had families, they had love, they had loyalty that lasted until the very end. And in their DNA, frozen in time, we can still read the story of a social system so successful it lasted for 100,000 years. Until the day it didn't. The flame had been burning for 300 years. 3 centuries. Think about that for a moment. In the cave known as Abri Romani, nestled in the ancient cliffs of northeastern Spain, generations of Neanderthals had kept the same fire alive. Through scorching summers and brutal winters, through births and deaths, through times of feast and desperate famine. They fed it with pine branches when the forests were lush, with bones when wood was scarce, with dried grass when nothing else remained. This wasn't just a fire, wild ones. This was the beating heart of their world. Fire wasn't just a tool for Neanderthals, explains archaeologist Joseph Valverdu, who excavated the site. It was the center of their social universe. Everything important happened around that flame. The evidence at Abri Romani is staggering. Over 200 distinct hearths have been found, layered one on top of another, like a timeline written in ash and smoke. Some are massive communal fires that could have warmed 30 people, testament to their strong community bonds. Others are small, personal flames, what researchers call sleeping fires, positioned exactly where someone would want warmth through a cold, unforgiving night. But the Neanderthals' mastery of fire went far beyond simply keeping warm. By 400,000 years ago, they had already discovered that different woods burned differently. Pine for quick, hot flames when cooking. Oak for long, steady heat through the night. Bones for smokeless fires that wouldn't reveal their position to cunning predators or rival clans. At Kizim Cave in Israel, researchers found evidence that shocked them. Neanderthals 400 years ago weren't just using fire. They were controlling it with a sophistication we didn't achieve again until the Industrial Revolution. They had created different temperature zones within the cave. Hot areas near 500 degrees Fahrenheit for cooking, warm zones around 200 degrees Fahrenheit for sleeping, and even cool areas for food storage. They were essentially engineering their living spaces with fire, notes archaeologist Rand Barkai. This isn't primitive. This is brilliant. This cooking revolution changed everything. Raw meat is tough, demanding powerful jaws and hours of chewing. Cooked meat is tender, its proteins already partially broken down, making it easier to digest. Raw tubers are barely digestible. Cooked ones release their starches, providing quick energy. Fire didn't just make food taste better. It made calories more accessible, freeing up crucial energy that could be used for bigger brains instead of bigger guts. At Shanidar Cave, researchers found something even more remarkable: evidence of chemistry. Neanderthals were creating birch tar, a complex adhesive that requires maintaining precise temperatures between 340 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit for hours. Too hot and the tar burns. Too cool and it won't form. They were achieving this feat 200,000 years before humans invented pottery to control the process. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional scientific application. But perhaps most remarkably, fire shaped their social lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. At Abri Romani, the hearths aren't randomly scattered. They're organized. Cooking fires near the cave entrance where smoke could escape. Sleeping fires along the walls. Craft fires for making tools or preparing hides in specific work areas that remained constant for centuries. Around these fires, knowledge passed from generation to generation. Grandmothers taught children which woods burned cleanest. Fathers showed sons how to bank coals to last through the night. Mothers demonstrated how long to roast a mammoth haunch until the fat rendered just right. The Spanish archaeologist Eudald Carbonell puts it beautifully. When Neanderthals gathered around their fires, they weren't just sharing warmth. They were sharing stories, knowledge, culture. The fire was their university, their library, their television. And when the last Neanderthal fires went out 28,000 years ago, it wasn't because they'd forgotten how to make them. In cave after cave, the final hearths are perfectly constructed, carefully maintained. They knew how to keep the flame alive. What they'd lost was the world that gave it meaning. The mammoth herd moved across the frozen plain like mountains given life. 43 animals, from massive matriarchs to calves barely hip-high to their mothers, following ancient paths worn deep by thousands of generations. They didn't notice the eyes watching from the ridge above. Goral studied the herd with the patience of a master. At 35, he was old for a hunter, but his mind held maps of mammoth movement that stretched back to his grandfather's time. He knew this matriarch, the one with the broken tusk. She'd summered at the Salt Lick near the Three Rivers for 20 years, always took the same path to winter grounds, always paused at the narrow valley where the stream cut deep. Behind him, 12 hunters waited. Not all were men. Ella and her sister Mora could throw a spear as straight as any male. Young Tar, only 14 but already strong as a bison, gripped his thrusting spear with white knuckles. This would be his first mammoth. The young bull, Goral whispered, gesturing with his chin toward a smaller male lingering at the herd's edge. He limps. They had been tracking him for 3 days. A festering wound on his rear leg, probably from a cave lion attack, had slowed him just enough. Still dangerous. Even a wounded mammoth could crush a hunter like dried leaves. But possible. The ambush point lay 2 miles ahead. A narrow defile where the cliffs pressed close, and the stream had cut the ground soft and treacherous. Their fathers had killed mammoth there. Their children would too if the herd survived. Modern archaeology tells us that Neanderthal mammoth hunting wasn't opportunistic. It was systematic. At Spy Cave in Belgium, researchers found the remains of at least 35 mammoths, all killed using the same technique. Spears driven between the ribs from below, piercing the heart or lungs. The angle of entry tells us the hunters were underneath their prey when they struck. They were getting close enough to smell the mammoth's breath, explains archaeologist Garrett Dusseldorp. This wasn't hunting. This was intimate combat. The nutrition numbers explain why they took such risks. A single adult mammoth provided 3,600 pounds of meat, enough to feed a clan of 25 for 2 months. The fat was even more valuable. 400 pounds of high-energy fuel that could be rendered, stored, mixed with dried meat to make pemmican that lasted through the hardest winters. The bones became tools, shelters, fuel. The hide provided leather for a dozen winter coats. The sinew made the strongest thread available. Even the ivory was carved into needles and ornaments. But it was the hunt itself that defined them. At La Côte de Saint-Brelade on Jersey, Neanderthals drove entire mammoth herds off cliffs in organized kills that required precise timing, deep knowledge of animal behavior, and extraordinary coordination. These weren't the actions of desperate scavengers, but of apex predators who had turned mammoth hunting into a science. Gorel's band reached the ambush point as the sun touched the horizon. They'd prepared this ground years ago. Hidden pit traps covered with branches, escape routes blocked with thorn barriers, spear caches positioned at critical points. Every hunter knew their role. The wounded bull entered the defile, favoring his infected leg. The matriarch trumpeted a warning, but too late. Mora and another hunter burst from cover, shouting and waving burning brands. The herd panicked, crushing forward. The wounded bull, unable to keep pace, found himself alone as the herd thundered past. Tar would always remember what happened next. The bull, sensing the trap, tried to turn. His wounded leg collapsed. As he struggled to rise, Gorel appeared beneath him like a ghost, driving his spear upward with every ounce of his strength. The flint point, sharp as surgical steel, found the gap between ribs. The bull's scream shook snow from the cliffs. Blood erupted from his trunk as his massive heart pumped its last. He swayed, steadied, took one step toward Gorel, and toppled like a falling mountain. Silence. Then Ella's victory cry, taken up by every throat. They'd done it. Tar had become a mammoth hunter. The clan would survive another winter. As darkness fell, they built fires around their kill, beginning the long work of butchery. Songs rose with the smoke. Ancient songs of gratitude to the mammoth spirit, of pride in the hunt, of promises that nothing would be wasted. 16,000 years later, the last mammoth would die on a lonely Arctic island. But on this night, in this valley, the great dance between hunter and hunted continued, as it had for 100,000 years. Neither predator nor prey could imagine it would ever end. The boy's screams had stopped 3 days ago. Now he lay still on the bed of furs, his leg grotesquely swollen from knee to hip, skin stretched tight and angry red with veins of black creeping upward like poison rivers. "He dies tonight," muttered Gorak, the clan's strongest hunter. "The black blood reaches his heart. He dies. We've all seen it." But Janna, the clan's healer, wasn't listening. She was grinding, her weathered hands working the pestle in steady circles, crushing the inner bark of the white tree into powder. Beside her lay mysteries. The gray mold scraped from certain damp rocks, the bitter root that made wounds close clean, the yellow flowers that brought down fever. She'd learned this knowledge from her grandmother, who'd learned from hers, reaching back through generations beyond counting. Not all of it worked. She buried too many patients to claim otherwise. But sometimes, just sometimes, the old ways surprised even her. "Hold him," she commanded. What happened next would have seemed impossible to archaeologists just decades ago. But chemical analysis of Neanderthal dental plaque has revealed they were sophisticated healers using natural antibiotics and painkillers in ways that wouldn't be rediscovered until modern times. At El Sidrón Cave in Spain, researchers found a young Neanderthal who'd suffered from a painful dental abscess. Trapped in his teeth's plaque were traces of poplar bark, which contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, and penicillin mold, the source of penicillin. He'd been self-medicating with nature's pharmacy 50,000 years before Alexander Fleming's accidental discovery. This wasn't random plant consumption, emphasizes researcher Karen Hardy. This was targeted pharmaceutical use. Jana spread the paste on the boy's leg, the mixture of ground bark, mold, and bare fat forming a gray-green paste that smelled of earth and rain. The boy whimpered but didn't wake. His mother held his hand, her eyes never leaving Jana's face. The evidence for Neanderthal medical knowledge extends far beyond antibiotics. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists found an apothecary's worth of medicinal plants. Yarrow for wound healing, marshmallow for digestive issues, grape hyacinth for inflammation. These weren't food plants. They were medicine. But perhaps most remarkably, Neanderthals performed successful surgeries. A skull from Krapina shows evidence of therapeutic trepanation, deliberate opening of the skull to relieve pressure. The patient survived, as shown by healing around the surgical site. At another site, an arm amputation shows clear evidence of medical intervention. The bone was cleanly cut, the wound carefully treated. The patient lived for years afterward. By morning, the black veins had stopped spreading. By the second day, the swelling began to recede. By the week's end, the boy was sitting up, weak but alive, slurping marrow broth while his mother wept with relief. But the most extraordinary medical story comes from Shanidar Cave itself. Shanidar I, an adult male, survived with injuries that should have killed him multiple times over. A crushed eye socket that left him partially blind, a withered arm that was eventually amputated, severe arthritis, and hearing loss. He lived to around 45, elderly by Neanderthal standards, meaning his clan cared for him for decades. This wasn't just medical treatment, notes archaeologist Penny Spikins. This was a health care system based on compassion. The knowledge was vast and specific. They knew which plants to harvest under the full moon when alkaloid content was highest. They understood that certain molds grew only on specific rocks in particular caves. They recognized that honey could prevent wound infection, that certain clays could draw out poison, that steam from boiling herbs could clear congested lungs. They set broken bones. We find healed fractures perfectly aligned. They developed splints from wood and leather. They even understood physical therapy, where patterns on healed injuries show patients were kept mobile during recovery. Jana lived to train 3 apprentices in her knowledge. Her treatment saved dozens of lives, from hunters gored by aurochs to children burning with fever to women struggling through difficult births. She couldn't save everyone. Neanderthal cemeteries show they mourned many early deaths. But she and healers like her gave their people something precious: hope. When modern humans arrived in Europe carrying new diseases, Neanderthal healers faced challenges their ancient pharmacy couldn't meet. Plagues that barely sickened the newcomers devastated Neanderthal clans. All their knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations couldn't combat pathogens their immune systems had never encountered. But before they vanished, they passed some of that knowledge on. Even today, traditional healers in remote parts of Europe use remedies that echo Neanderthal practices. The willow bark tea your great-grandmother brewed for headaches. The moldy bread applied to wounds. The steam treatments for congestion. All carry whispers of wisdom first discovered by healers like Jana, saving lives in caves lit only by fire. Professor João Zilho stood in the darkness of Cueva de Ardales, his headlamp illuminating something that would shatter a century of assumptions. The red ochre splashed across the cave wall wasn't random. It was deliberate, patterned, meaningful. And according to the uranium-thorium dating results he just received, it was 65,000 years old. 20,000 years before modern humans set foot in Europe, someone had created art here. And that someone could only have been a Neanderthal. I actually sat down on the cave floor, Zilho recalls. Everything we thought we knew about cognitive evolution, about what made us special as a species, it all crumbled in that moment. The discovery sent shock waves through archaeology. For over a century, art had been the defining line between us and them. We were the artists, the symbol makers, the ones who painted our dreams on stone. Neanderthals were the ones who couldn't, wouldn't, didn't, except they did. The evidence is now overwhelming. In 3 separate caves across Spain, Neanderthals created the world's oldest known cave art. Hand stencils made by blowing pigment around a hand pressed to the wall. Geometric patterns of dots and lines. abstract shapes that might represent animals or might represent something beyond our understanding. But to understand what this means, we need to stand where they stood, in the deepest dark of the cave. Imagine it. You're following your grandmother through passages you've traveled since childhood. The cave swallows all sound except your breathing and the soft scuff of feet on stone. Light dies just meters from the entrance. You're navigating by touch, memory, and the faint air currents that tell you where passages open and close. 300 meters in, a 10-minute journey through absolute darkness. She stops. I feel. She mixes the ochre she's carried in a hollow stone with water from an underground pool. The mixture has to be perfect. Too thin and it won't stick. Too thick and it won't spray. Now, she whispers, make your mark. You press your hand against the cold stone, feeling the countless hands that have pressed here before. Your grandmother takes a hollow bird bone, fills her mouth with ochre mixture and blows. The spray coats everything except where your hand blocks it. When you pull away, your hand's negative remains, floating pale against the red. So you are remembered, she says. So you remember. The hand stencils are just the beginning. At La Pasiega Cave, Neanderthals created a red ladder-like symbol that might be the world's oldest known symbolic representation. At 64,000 years old, it predates any modern human art by 20,000 years. Near it later, modern humans added animal figures, creating a multi-species art gallery spanning millennia. They weren't just making marks, explains archaeologist Alistair Pike. They were creating symbols that meant something to their community. The implications ripple outward. If Neanderthals created art, they had symbolic thought. If they had symbolic thought, they had complex language to share those symbols' meanings. If they had complex language, they had culture, mythology, perhaps even religion. At Bruniquel Cave in France, the evidence becomes even more extraordinary. Deep in the cave, 336 meters from any natural light, Neanderthals built mysterious circular structures from hundreds of broken stalagmites. The structures are 176,000 years old, making them among the oldest known human constructions. But why build circles from stone in the perfect darkness? Why travel so far from daylight to do it? This wasn't functional, notes archaeologist Jacques Joubert. This was ritual. This was meaning made manifest in stone. The structures show evidence of fire, not cooking fires, but small flames placed at specific points. In the darkness, these fires would have created a dancing light show on the cave walls, shadows and flame bringing the stone circles to life. It's impossible not to think of ceremony, of initiation, of mysteries we'll never fully understand. But perhaps most remarkably, Neanderthals adorned themselves. At Krapina in Croatia, they collected white-tailed eagle talons, not for food, but for jewelry. 8 talons, carefully notched and polished, strung together as a necklace or bracelet. At 130,000 years old, it's among the world's oldest jewelry. Think about what that means. Someone looked at an eagle's claw and saw not just a claw, but potential beauty. Someone spent hours polishing and shaping, creating something that had no survival value whatsoever. Someone wore it and others saw it and understood it meant something, status perhaps, or clan identity, or just that the wearer appreciated. And that, Wild Ones, is the story of the Neanderthals. A story of unimaginable strength, deep familial bonds, incredible ingenuity, and a profound, often overlooked, humanity. They weren't just a footnote in our history. They were an essential part of it, shaping the very genes that run through us today. What was the most surprising thing you learned about Neanderthals? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the wild, untamed stories of human history and survival, make sure to like this video, subscribe to The Human Wild, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Stay wild, everyone.